want to relate to you a story that happened to me the other day. I was in the Flying J in Reseca, Georgia. I was in the store. I was in line waiting to pay for some stuff I was buying. The fellow in front of me in line obviously knew the girl at the till and was chatting away to her as she rang through stuff for customers. And he was saying to her, "My God, I'm tired. I've never been so tired in my life. I'm so tired right now I could just drop right here where I stand." He was exhausted. The cashier was sympathetic but kept on working, and he turned to look at me, and I said, "You're not a truck driver, are you?" He said, "Oh yes, I am." I said, "Well, you're not going back out and drive the truck when you're that exhausted, I hope." He said, "Well, I have to." He said, I'm on this new run. I want to keep this new run. They got me out late. I'm not used to the new shift, but I've got to do it. I've got to go. This is, I need the job, and I want this run. I got to go." And I thought, man, that doesn't sound good. So he paid for his stuff and went out the door, and then I came up and paid for my stuff. And by that time, I wanted to continue talking to him because I thought, boy, I don't think this is a good idea for this fella. He's just wiped. He shouldn't be going anywhere, especially in a truck. But I couldn't find him by the time I paid for my stuff. He'd gone. And I felt guilty for letting him go. I thought, boy, that's just not right. That's just not a safe scenario for that guy to be out in the road. And I didn't know what the right thing to do was. I didn't know if I should call the police on the guy or what. But, you can't really do that. He's a fellow truck driver and you feel guilty. But he was clearly so tired he could hardly stand. And yet there he was heading back out on the road again. And probably he had the hours of service available to continue on his run. He just didn't have the mental and physical capacity to do it safely. And that's a problem in our industry too. Just because you have the hours available to you doesn't mean that it's always safe for you to go. There's common sense involved. You've got to be able to make a common sense decision. And if you don't feel safe to drive, or if you're tired, you shouldn't be driving. And some companies, I'm sure, are very hard to approach. When you're in the middle of a run and they've got you on a scheduled thing, I'm sure they're not very happy when you phone in and say, "You know what, I'm just too tired. I've got to stop for a little while." Well, I'm sure they'll complain that the freight's going to be late, but would they feel better if you rolled the truck just trying to do it? It doesn't make any sense. So part of what you've got to do as a professional, the ultimate decision is yours. And you've got to know when the point is when no matter what anybody says, it's not safe to continue because it's not safe to continue. Ultimately, it's your decision because ultimately it's your responsibility. Now, I see that the FMCSA is addressing bullying when it comes to drivers and companies and shippers and receivers. And there's going to be penalties involved. But basically they're talking about preventing bullying to exceed the hours of service. But there's also bullying that goes on even when you've got the hours, but the weather is too bad or you're too tired or for whatever reason. There's a point at which it's not a smart move to keep going. And the FMCSA hasn't made any noise in looking at that so far. It's still going to be a personal decision of the driver. And the driver has to remember that ultimately, if there's an accident, it's your fault because you didn't know enough to stop. And it's hard not to be the good guy and get the load through and make the shipper happy and make the receiver happy and make the dispatcher happy. But nobody's happy if you're upside down. And it could be someone else having to call your wife and say, "Well, Jimmy rolled the truck because he was trying to keep the schedule and Jimmy's in the hospital," or worse. You don't want that. So the article that I read on the FMCSA approaching the subject of bullying, it's made it clear that if the driver is going to bring a report to the FMCSA saying, hey, the company's bullying me or the shipper's bullying me, the weight of proof will be on the driver. And truly that makes sense. So my advice here is, if you ever get into a situation like that, whether you've got the hours of service or not, when you're tired and someone's saying, you've got to go, and you're saying, geez, I just don't feel good enough, it's just not safe. And if they're pushing you, document everything. Make notes, get names, call your dispatcher, call the guy above your dispatcher. Document everything, because that's bullying too. Ultimately, the decision is yours. You're the professional. That's part of what you're getting paid for, is to get the load there safely from point A to point B. And if anything's out of whack, it's your responsibility. So do the smart thing, do the safe thing, and go only when you're in condition to go.